All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining us tonight for our next presentation in the IWB Education Series. As always, our goal is to provide some good information that will be helpful for you and maybe others as they pursue financial independence. So, a quick disclaimer. Innovative Wealth Building is a registered investment advisory firm headquartered in California, Maryland. Of course, this is meant to be educational. Any investment does involve some degree of risk. Past performance does not guarantee future performance. Client examples used are hypothetical and are intended to demonstrate concepts. And although IWB works across the country in many states, we are only able to officially work with folks in states where we are duly registered and appointed. So there's our disclaimers. The Chief Compliance Officer is happy, and I'll go ahead and tell you about today's presenters. You've heard from these two before, myself, Terry Parham, my much better half, Kenna Parham. Kenna is the Chief Technology Officer and Financial Planner at Innovative Wealth Building. She also graduated college earlier than most of us at age 19. She's a certified financial planner and chartered financial consultant, and also a certified nutrition coach. And then myself, Terry, I have the honor of being Chief Financial Officer, also financial planner with Innovative Wealth Building, and had the opportunity to chat with some of you on prior conversations. So, looking forward to today's presentations, and you will see us on screen in just a moment when Kenna takes over to kick off. As you probably know, the topic today is to Roth or not to Roth. It's an important question, hopefully not quite as important as a similar question I think that Shakespeare had asked, but we're going to talk about the implications, both short, intermediate, and long term, when it comes to how a Roth may or may not be a valuable benefit in your long range planning. Before we kickstart, we wanted to spend just a moment recognizing a nonprofit. So many of us are charitably inclined. Recently, we came across the Hold You Foundation, and we were just so moved by what they do. What they do is their mission is to provide financial assistance to those that have a child facing a critical illness. When your child's in trouble, your world stops. So, what they do is they help provide basic resources for folks who are going through a terrible, terrible time in their family. That could be helping them pay for parking, getting groceries, paying rent because they can't work because they're taking care of a child. So we are going to be supporters of this organization, but we thought we would just spotlight them today. If anyone was just thinking earlier today, man, what's a good charity out there? This is one we can honestly say we believe in, and it's run locally by someone that we know. So we went on Amazon, changed our little smile.com, so now 0.5% of all of our purchases are going to this nonprofit, and we look forward to contributing and helping and supporting families as well. So again, if anybody was just happening to think about, I wonder if there's a cool charity out there where I can benefit children and their families who are in need, this could be a good one. So we just wanted to spotlight a charity here today, and we're going to continue to do that in the future. Now, today's agenda, we're going to talk about Roth account basics. We'll then talk about the practical applications of how this works in life and in retirement using some real world scenarios. And then we'll bring in the historical context just so we can think and see how and why this may be important going forward. So without further ado, I will get ready to pass over to Kenna. She's going to turn on the camera and get going. Before I do so, I usually do a sound check, but I forgot today. So anyone who can navigate to the chat box, if you could please just say yes, good to go, something like that, just to let me know that you hear us. And as always, if you have questions, you can type them in the chat box, but we already do have some questions that were submitted that we're going to cover today. So thank you very much. I got it all good. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the controls over to Kenna, and we're going to get going. Again, thank you for being here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
All right, thanks Terry for the introduction, and I'm going to start my video here. So good evening, everybody. We're currently on the West Coast in Los Angeles, but I know many of you are on the East Coast. So hope everyone is having a great evening so far, and we're just happy that you're here to join us for our presentation today. So like Terry said, I'm going to kick off the first half and then I'll pass it over to him to finish us off. I'm going to start off with Roth basics. So sometimes we can either jump in and get complicated, or we can just start with the basics and then build from there. And that's going to be the goal for today's presentation, is start with the basics, explain the simple parts, and then we'll make it a little more complex as we go through the presentation. So we'll start off with this slide. This is a flow chart, and it's basically asking, should I consider doing a Roth conversion? Now, many of you may think, oh no, is she going to dissect this whole flow chart and walk us through it? Well, many of you may look at this and say, this looks confusing, and it does. This is supposed to be a simple, easy step to whether or not you should look into doing Roth conversions for yourself. And we really put this on this slide here to show you that Roth conversions are complex. Roth rules can be complex. IRAs have a lot to them, and sometimes they're not as simple as people may seem to think they are, which is why we were compelled to do a presentation today about Roths versus traditionals and talking about IRAs in general. So we will urge you to, as you go through this presentation, write down notes. It'll cause you to think of different things and different questions about your own situation, but it is a complex topic, and there's a lot of parts involved, but we're going to try and make it as easy as possible. And just know that we will answer a lot of your questions today, but if you have any further questions offline, we'll be happy to chat with you further. So the first question is, what is a Roth IRA? So a Roth IRA is an individual retirement account. It actually was a savings option that opened up to the public in around the 1997, 1998 timeframe. So in the late 90s, it became available, the specific Roth IRA, which is good to know, because a lot of times I've heard people in the past tell me, since being a financial planner, oh, I think the Roth option just started in 2010 or 2012, but it's actually been around for a very long time. It's just that not a lot of people knew about it. They only knew about traditional IRAs. So following Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks also started becoming popular and available to certain employer plans in 2006. Now, I will say not every retirement plan or employer plan with your company will have a Roth option. A lot of companies nowadays are adding that to their plan. So that's definitely something to take a look at. If you're not utilizing a Roth 401k option, it's good to know whether or not you have it available to you. But Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks have been around for longer than people would imagine. So let's start off with Roth IRA 101. Like I said, they're individual retirement accounts. So typically people will invest in a 401k or Roth 401k first at their job or their employer, and then they'll use IRAs as a secondary account to continue investing excess dollars they want to put towards retirement. So simply put, it's an individual retirement account. You have to have earned income in order to contribute. So you actually have to be earning income, except if you're, and I say earned household income. So if you have a spouse who's not working, you can contribute on their behalf, but there has to be household earned income. And with Roth IRAs, they're subject to income limitations versus traditional. So based off your modified adjusted gross income, that'll determine if you're able to actually contribute to it or not. The actual annual contribution that most who qualify based off their adjusted gross income is about $6,000 per year. They do make increases every year, every other year, depending on when they decide to do so. And you can put $7,000, so an extra $1,000 a year into the IRA if you're age 50 years old and older. So it's called a catch-up contribution. Most people are familiar with it, but if you're not familiar, you can put $7,000 if you're 50 and older, and $6,000 younger than 50. The main important point of a Roth IRA and taking advantage of a Roth IRA is tax-free long-term investing. So one of the best benefits is when you put money in, and we'll talk about this as I get through the rest of the presentation, is when you put money into a Roth IRA, that money is tax-free when you take it out at withdrawal, especially when in the retirement age. So that's the most important part, is building and growing tax-free dollars for your future versus taxable dollars. And when you do contribute to the Roth IRA, you are contributing after tax dollars. So the contribution that you take and put into the account is after tax, meaning that the income that you received or the amount that you received is taxed already. And so you're putting into the account, and that account is growing tax-free, tax deferred, and then taking out tax-free. So that is Roth IRA 101. Now I want to talk a little bit more about Roth IRA and traditional IRA similarities. A lot of us are familiar with traditional IRAs. It's what people have used forever and ever and ever. A lot of people are utilizing Roth and traditional, or just Roth, or just traditional, depending on your situation. But let's talk about some similarities. So I mentioned earlier, there is a requirement where you do have to have earned income, but it's household income. So I do want to say that if someone in your home is not working, if the spouse is not working, they're taking care of the children, working inside of the home, you can still contribute to a Roth for them on their behalf with the household income. So household income needs to be earned in order to contribute. Age. So as long as someone has income they're earning, they can contribute to a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. The contribution amounts are the same. So every time there's an increase, it used to be 5,500 that you can contribute every year. Now it's 6,000. They usually align the two. So whatever the Roth is, the traditional is. You can always contribute the same maximum amount. And then the contribution year, in the year that you have to contribute between January 1st and April 15th, so the tax deadline. So you want to make sure, a lot of people typically will contribute and make sure they get their taxes in, or their contributions in before tax time when it comes to traditional IRAs. And then in most situations, the distribution without a 10% penalty and after age 59 and a half, you can just take distributions from both of these accounts, principal and interest. In some situations for traditional IRAs, you can qualify for exceptions on early distribution. We won't get into that today, but that could be first-time home buying, some education expenses. There's a little bit more specifics on that. Those are certain situations where you can take earlier distributions, but a full principal and interest distribution can be taken without a 10% penalty after age 59 and a half. And then other similarities that I would say are most important is investment choices and options. A lot of times people think that depending on a certain Roth IRA or a certain traditional IRA, they'll have different choices and investment options available to them. The account, they both can be invested in bonds, stocks, ETFs, all types of mutual funds, individual stocks, all sorts of investments. There's no limitation. Now, it depends on what institution you're invested with, but you can invest in whatever you want in a Roth IRA, especially if you're in an institution where there's a lot of flexibility in what types of investments you can put your money into. So there's no differentiator there between Roth and traditional. And then both of these accounts do grow tax deferred. So that is a benefit, is once you put the money in, there's no taxes while the money's sitting in. And then there's obviously at the end of when you're at the time frame when you're ready to take distributions, the taxes are a little different between the two accounts. So these are the big similarities on both of the accounts and how they function. Now let's get into Roth and traditional IRA differences. The biggest difference between the two is taxes. So when it comes to putting traditional IRA, you obviously tax, so there's no taxes that's paid on the money that you put in, and wait, and it grows tax deferred all the way until you're ready to take it out. Once you're ready to take it out and withdraw it, then you have to deal with taxes. So there's no deduction on taxes with a Roth because you've already taken taxes out, you've paid them now, you paid your taxes, then you deposit the contribution, and then you make no tax payments on any of the contributions and on any of the growth once you're ready to take it out at that age in retirement. So the biggest difference is how taxes function in these two different accounts. So let's talk about the two main differences. I'll cover Roth first, and then we'll go through traditional. So with Roth, like I said, it's after-tax contributions, already paid the tax, put the money in the account. The withdrawals are tax-free. So when you get into retirement, if you have $700,000 of Roth money and you're ready to start taking distributions, generally in most situations, the withdrawals are tax-free. You're not paying any taxes. If you take a $3,000 distribution, that $3,000 is exactly what you're receiving, and you're not paying taxes on that amount. You can withdraw your contributions at any time with no penalty or taxes. So if someone puts in, $6,000 a year for 20 years, they can take out at any point in time that $6,000 that they put in for 20 years, and they don't have to pay any penalties or any taxes because the government said, hey, you've already paid the taxes on the money. We don't need any taxes. So you're free to take that $6,000 per year out when you want to. So there's no limitations there. Like I said, there's no income tax deduction because you've already paid for it. So there's no tax break there. But one of the biggest benefits is there's no required minimum distribution requirement. So we'll get into traditional and how that functions, but there's no requirement to take certain specific amounts out of your Roth once you hit age 72, reoccurring year after year. You can leave that money in for as long as you want and let it grow. So a lot of times people will have a Roth account, and that'll be the last bucket that they take money out of in retirement because they're wanting to invest that more aggressively and have that money grow as long as it can and get as big as it can, which leads me into my next point. Roth IRAs are great for leaving a tax-free legacy. So a lot of times people will want to plan in their estate plan to leave, a certain amount of money to their children or to a family member or to a charity that they care about or a church. And the best way to leave money is in a tax-free environment, which is utilizing a Roth. So if you want to leave money to your children, especially leaving Roth money would just give them more tax-free withdrawals when they use that money in the future. And then it does have potential. The more Roth tax-free dollars you have in retirement, the greater the potential is for your Social Security taxes on your Social Security paycheck to be lower. So a lot of times when people will have a lot of pre-tax money, so a lot of taxable accounts, their Social Security check will be higher taxed because they have more income that they're taking from distributions, from pensions, in that type of way. So these are the differences between a Roth, and then we'll get into the ones of comparing it to traditional. So when it comes to traditional, they are, like I said, pre-tax contributions. Withdrawals are fully taxable at current income levels when you get to retirement. So when you get out, let's say you retire at 66, and you decide you want to starting to take distributions, $1,000 a month, you'll have to take a look at your income, and your withdrawal will be fully taxable at that stage in your career when you retire. Whether you're retired or you're not and you want to start taking money out, it's fully taxable. If you do want to take early withdrawals from the account, you will be subject to the 10% penalty before 59 and a half. So you will have to pay that. You can take early withdrawals, but you will have that 10% penalty and you will have to pay taxes. So if you're in your 40s and it's not a qualifying event like buying a home for the first time, or utilizing like a qualifying expense, like I said earlier, was utilizing money for education, you will have taxes due and the 10% penalty. A benefit that a traditional IRA is potentially people like using it because it can lower their taxable income. So that's a situation where you can write off on your taxes, your taxable income will be lower because the more you contribute, the better it will be for your tax situation. You don't get that in a Roth. And the last one, like I mentioned, compared to the Roth, is you have that required minimum distribution at age 72, where you will be calculated a specific amount that you're supposed to take from your traditional IRA, and you will have to take a specific amount every single year. And the reason why they have that rule is because the money's been growing tax deferred for 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how long you've been investing in a traditional IRA. And the government says, hey, we want our money, we want our taxes, so start taking money out. We're not going to let you grow this thing and defer it any longer. You're going to start paying taxes now. So those are the big differences. It's kind of a mouthful. There's a lot on this screen. So if I were you, I would take a picture and it'll just help jog your memory on the major differences between the two. And like I said, in every situation, there's no situation where you can't use a traditional. There's lots of opportunities and lots of ways that traditionals help, but Roths are just so important for that tax-free long-term investing that it's really, really helpful to know the benefits on how it can help your situation. I'm going to quickly touch on Roth 401ks because I know that's something like a lot of employers are adding to their plans. It's becoming much more popular. A lot of people are starting to utilize it, and so I want to touch on it. It also functions the same as a Roth IRA. They have after-tax contributions. The account grows tax deferred for as long as you're investing in it. And withdrawals are tax-free, assuming you meet the requirements of age 59 and a half and a 5-year rule. And one of the differences between a Roth 401k and a Roth IRA is the amount that you take home as your take-home pay will be smaller because you're taking a contribution, you're getting taxed on it, and then you're putting it into the Roth 401k. So that essentially would make your paycheck smaller in a sense than if you were to invest pre-tax into a regular 401k. The one major difference between a Roth 401k and a Roth IRA, which I think is pretty monumental, is the contribution amounts. So, like in a regular 401k, you can contribute 20,500 as of 2022. They increase those limits not every year, but depending on when they want to, like Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs, they'll increase the limits. And if you're over 50, you can do an extra 6,500, so $27,000 is the max you can put in. That's a lot of money to put into a 401k that grows tax deferred, and then you can take out tax free in retirement over 20 or so years. If you're maxing out or even putting half towards that every year as you're accumulating assets and growing your retirement portfolio, that's a lot of money. So if you're utilizing the Roth portion at work, that's really smart. In most situations, like I said, it depends on the certain situation. It's not perfect for everybody, depending on your tax situation. But for most people, you really can't beat growing $20,500 contributions per year plus growth in the market. So just something to consider. A takeaway would be to look into your Roth 401ks, plans, see if you have Roth as an option, and that would be something better. Like I said, you would save much, much more money long term, and you would retain 100% of that account at retirement. So 100% of the total balance of that investment account at retirement would be yours versus having to pay taxes on it in a regular 401k. So those are just some of the benefits and the ways that a Roth 401k functions. Let's switch gears just a little bit, and then I'm going to pass it over to Terry and talk a little bit more about a specific quick example. So you have two people, you've got Sally and you've got Ed. We have both of their net worths here listed on the screen. And the question is, who's in a better financial situation? So without knowing anything specific about what type of accounts they have, how much money they make, how long they've worked, if Sally has a net worth of 700,000 and Ed has a net worth of 900,000, the question would be, who's in the better financial situation? So a lot of people would think Ed is. He has 200,000 more. And this is just investable assets, talking about net worth. So I want to clarify that. Investable assets. He has 200,000 more, so most people would assume Ed is in a better financial situation. Well, let's take a look. So if we look at Sally's situation versus Ed, 100% of Sally's assets are invested in Roth IRAs or Roth 401ks. So since Sally started working, she invested in Roth IRA and Roth 401k at work from the very beginning. She never put money into pre-tax accounts. So in her situation, she owns 100% of her retirement account. 100% of her withdrawals is hers. So when she gets to retirement and she has that $700,000, all of that 700,000 is hers. So she basically owns 100% of her retirement investable asset accounts. Now in Ed's situation, he's got $900,000 as an investable net worth. 100% of his assets are in traditional IRA and regular 401k. So it's a big contrast, but it's just showing you someone used pre-tax accounts, someone used after-tax. He only owns about 70% of his retirement. And the reason for that is because 30% is going to have to go to the government. So 30% of his distributions and his withdrawals are not his. They go straight to the government. He keeps 70. So that is the power of really investing in assets like Roth and taking full advantage of the tax benefits that you will receive in retirement. There's nothing greater than being able to say 100% of my assets or even 80% of my assets are mine, and the rest of it is what it is. It goes to taxes. There's nothing wrong with paying taxes, but it's just so important to know if you're young or if you're still working and you're still contributing to retirement accounts, there's nothing wrong and there's no harm in starting at any point in your career. Putting into a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, tax-free dollars can never hurt. So it's just the power of tax-free, and it just really shows that a lot of times people will think, based off the number, Ed's in a better situation, but if you take a look at their specific situation and the types of accounts and how they're taxed, it just makes such a difference in the long term and what they're able to do in their flexibility. So I just wanted to share this example. It's very simple, but I think it's a powerful one to note. And like I said, a lot of people are not in Sally's situation. We don't see people every day that have 100% of their assets in Roth IRA or Roth 401k. That's usually not the case. So it's painting kind of a rosy picture, but I think as we start to educate people more and more and more, and Roth becomes more popular with employer plans, and Roth IRAs become more popular, and people really start to understand them because they can be complex. I do believe that as the years go on, the decades go on, people will start to put more money towards Roth, and there will be a big push for more tax-free investing and tax-free dollars in retirement, which is just helpful and beneficial for everybody. Whew. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to answer a couple questions that we received from the audience before we signed in today. We had people type in some questions when they registered, and then I'm going to pass it over to Terry, and he's going to take it away with some historical data and just talking about some real life examples of people actually utilizing a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. So a couple questions we received. The first one is, if we already have a Roth IRA, can we continue contributing to it, and should we continue contributing to it, or is opening a second Roth recommended in the out years? So yes, if you already have a Roth IRA, you can definitely continue contributing to it. You have to have earned income, like I said, household earning income, which I talked about earlier. There's no difference in opening up a second one. The only reason why we would say opening up a second one would be better is if, let's say you're with a specific company who only allows you to invest in specific investments with just mutual funds. And let's say you want to do ETFs or individual stocks. Well, you may want to consider moving to a different institution that allows you to have access to a greater amount of investment strategies versus being in one that's limited. So that would be the only reason why we would say open up a second one, to give you more flexibility on your investment choices depending on what the specific institution you're invested with allows. But most today, like Charles Schwab, TD, Fidelity, all these big companies are typically pretty flexible in their approach and what they allow on their platform. The downsides of Roth is you can't contribute typically more than you earn. For a lot of people, that's not really an issue. And then you pay taxes today versus you paying at distribution. So there's not really a huge downside except for paying taxes today. So for people who like to get that tax incentive with a pre-tax account, that you don't get that with a Roth IRA. So that would be the main answer for that first question. The second question is, are there age restrictions on when you can open a Roth IRA, and can teenagers open one? This is a really good question. There's no age restriction, whether it's a Roth or a traditional. The teenager just has to have earned income. So I was telling Terry, I was like, we do a lot of social media with Innovative Wealth Building, and we have a son, Everett, who's 2. Technically, if we wanted to hire Everett to be a model and take pictures of him and utilize them for our website or for our social media, for any promotional type of event, we could pay him and use some of that money to invest into a Roth IRA for him, because essentially it's earned income. Now, the earned income for a young child like that has to make sense, has to be reasonable. We wouldn't pay him like $100,000 for one picture. It has to make sense, but you still can open up investment accounts, Roth IRA specifically, like this for a teenager, as long as they have earned income. And it's a great idea to start as young as possible if the child has income and they can't contribute more than they earn. So if they only earn $4,000 in that year, that's all they could contribute. They couldn't contribute the maximum amount at $6,000. So that's a great question. The last question is, why would I want to convert funds from a regular IRA to a Roth if I'm retired and not currently working? Wouldn't it be better to wait until I need to draw funds so the taxes that I pay will be at a lower rate? Terry's going to touch on this, so I'll just briefly touch on this. So like I mentioned earlier, converting could be helpful, because if you are looking to leave a legacy, you could leave a tax-free legacy versus a taxable legacy. Your taxation on Social Security also could be decreased by the higher your tax-free dollar accounts are. So the more Roth money you have could also make your taxation of Social Security lower. Your Medicare premiums, well, that's based off of your income, so that could also be lower depending on how much you don't have to. If you don't have to take out a lot of distributions from your Roth, then you don't have to worry about your taxable income going up. And then I would say, just overall throughout retirement, you just pay much less in taxes. You don't pay taxes at all, especially on tax-free Roth IRAs. So over the lifetime, the more you convert, the more you have in retirement tax-free. And then I'll touch on one point about paying taxes later at a lower rate versus now. Taxes historically, and Terry's going to go over a chart on this, are at a pretty low point right now. So we really urge a lot of people to, typically in most situations, put money towards a Roth IRA, because the taxes they're going to pay now on the contributions they put in are probably not going to, they're definitely going to be lower than what they'll pay in retirement. They're at such a low point, so the odds of them being even lower are really not high. So we believe that the time is now to put money into it in most situations and not wait, because we don't think that taxes will, get it any lower than they are today. So that's a really good question, but that would be the best answer for that. So that's all the questions that I'm going to cover today. Terry's going to cover a couple of the other questions that we received, but that is it for my portion. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to him. He'll talk about practical applications. He'll talk about taxes and actually what it means to put money into a Roth IRA. How does that look for certain individuals? And he'll talk about more specifics. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my video. It was nice chatting with everybody, and we hope everyone's enjoying the presentation so far, and I'll let Terry finish us off.
All right. Well, thank you, Kenna. I'm going to pick up from there. No promises that I'll be able to keep the level of excellence going, but I'll give it the old college try. So again, we have some questions that I will answer that were submitted in advance. If there are other questions you have as I'm going through the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat box, use the Q&A function, and I'll definitely answer your questions while we go through. So hopefully you've gotten a pretty good sense of the Roth basics. It's an important question to consider, and there's these big implications, as Ken has kind of alluded to, from taxes to Social Security to RMDs to estate planning, legacy planning, etc. So a lot of things to consider. I'm going to try to keep this pretty straightforward with some of the practical applications. And where I'll start is the fact that for many of the folks that we work with, we'll build some type of retirement analysis. And in this situation, simply put, there's a black line here that kind of slopes upwards over time. The black line is the spending goal that this particular fictitious family has. And as you can see, this black line kind of increases a little bit and then it spikes up. Focus on that green. That green is what Kenna talked about earlier, required minimum distributions. If you're someone who has pretty decent investable assets, at some point in the future, if they're not Roth, Uncle Sam says, hey, time to pay your taxes, you've got to take that money out. So the question is, what if you don't want to take the money out? What if you don't want to spend it? What if you don't want your tax brackets to change? And the answer is, too bad, because it's got to come out. If you don't take the money out, there's a 50% penalty on the amount you didn't take out. So think about that. They say, you know what, Terry, you've got to take out $50,000 this year. Terry says, no, Chuck Norris and I are pretty tough guys. We're just going to decline. They may not find Chuck Norris, but they're going to find you $25,000. And that's going to compound every single year. So you've got to take the money out. So how does this look? In this family's situation, their spending requirements were pretty much met off of their $100,000 of income that they had. So from Social Security, from pensions, they had $100,000 a year coming in and they were feeling pretty good. Once they turned 72, take a look at the bottom right. The income doubles from one year to the next because they had no choice. Their income doubled from $112,000 to $224,000. So obviously your federal taxes are going up. If you live somewhere with state taxes, those are going up. Your Social Security, your Medicare, everything else is going to be impacted. So we often call this the retirement savings time bomb. By deferring taxes, you're saying, I'll pay later, I'll pay later, I'll pay later. And the bag of money with later on it is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. At some point, you got to pop the balloon and let some of the air out. And unfortunately, if you wait too long, it's quite a big explosion or implosion when it's time to start spending down that money. So again, let's just look at a scenario where even if it were $54,000, it could make a difference. This is just showing you quickly, if you Google required minimum distributions, all you basically need is your account value at the end of the last year, and then what your age was, and it will tell you how much you need to take out. But this is just to say 54,000 might be what some people see, 100,000, 20,000, whatever. The part that matters is with these Social Security taxes and with these Medicare taxes, going over by $1 can make a difference. So if you've never heard about provisional income and Social Security, let me just give you the bottom line. When it comes to Social Security, you can pay 0% in taxes on your Social Security, or 85% of your Social Security can be taxable. Again, with Social Security, 0% can be taxable or 85% can be taxable. Most people would probably enjoy paying 0% taxes on their Social Security. That could save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars by not paying taxes. The good news is it's your choice. You can possibly set yourself up to not have to pay Social Security taxes. The bad news is you sure aren't going to be able to do it if you don't have Roth money, um, or other types of resources that are non-tax deferred, that are not 401ks, not pre-tax traditional IRAs. So again, we're not going to look too much at the brackets and calculate provisional income, but conceptually, just remember your Social Security can be 0% taxable or 85% taxable. It may not be possible to pay 0% forever. However, what I like to help people do is maybe for 1, 3, 5, 10 years, let's structure a plan to where maybe we do avoid taxes altogether for 3 or 5 years instead of zero. So just ask yourself, if you could choose, would you like to have at least 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years of paying no taxes by being tactical with your distribution plan? And the answer is probably yes. I mean, who wants to pay taxes? Maybe some people, I don't mind. But again, it's nothing illegal. It's just being thoughtful and being strategic to minimize the tax drag on your portfolio. Medicare premiums. Contrary to what some may think, Medicare is not free. It's about $170 per month per person. Now, that's at the base level rate. For many people, maybe that's where their income will fall. If you're single, it's under $91,000. If you're married, it's $182,000 or less. You're paying $170 per month per person. So for a family, it could be close to $5,000 for the average retired couple. Now, if you go over by $1, your premiums go up significantly. Now we're looking at $7,000 a year for that same family. If it goes up to the next level, it goes up to 10,000 a year, and then almost 13,000 a year. And at the very top, which some people are there, they're paying $16,500 a year for the same exact coverage that everybody else is getting and paying way less for. Again, it's important to control these brackets. Don't let yourself go over by $1 and cost yourself $5,000 in the process. You want to keep an eye on this. There's a 2-year look back for determining your Medicare premiums. So again, planning and being thoughtful is what's going to help you stay ahead of this and not end up having that retirement savings time bomb and that Medicare time bomb go off and really blow up your situation. So if there's any questions, let me know. But again, the bottom line is Medicare is not one price for everybody. It's not like the gas station. We can't all just drive up and pay $7. It's different. Again, depending on your income level, there's going to be a lot of different tiers of what you pay. I guess that's kind of like regular gas, premium, and mid-grade, right? There's different prices. There's different levels to this. So let's just kind of think about some considerations when it comes to your money. And I probably don't need them, but I put them there because if I don't have notes, I talk way too much. So let's just think about your money. Um, Arms. You can probably tell I lift a lot. All I do is arms in the gym. Just kidding. I don't lift as much as I should. But how do you feel about arms? And what I mean by an arm is an adjustable rate mortgage. If somebody's willing, can you kind of type in the chat box and tell me, how do you feel about arms, adjustable rate mortgages? And this can be historical. I know it may be different today than it was 2 years ago or 5 years ago. But if anybody's willing, I want to see the first person's answer about how they feel about adjustable rate mortgages. Okay, Kathy says no way. And I can understand that because you're living in your house, and at some point, if interest rates skyrocket, payment go up drastically. Well, here's the bad news. Pre-tax IRAs or pre-tax investments are adjustable rate investments. That's all they are, because we don't know what the tax rate is going to be that you're going to pay in the future. So you don't like adjustable rate mortgages for your house, but you're okay with an adjustable rate investment for your retirement assets? I don't know. May want to rethink that if I were you. Not to say 100% Roth is the answer, but this is a thing to consider. Do you want to really be at the mercy of the economic factors outside of your control? Maybe, maybe not. Now, in today's environment, an adjustable rate mortgage may not be a bad idea. Some home interest rates are 6%, and if you do an ARM, maybe you can lock in 4% or so. And although it costs more to get an ARM, it'll pay for itself in just a couple years, and then maybe it gives you a 7-year runway to then refinance down the road. So presently, ARMs are definitely more attractive than they were when interest rates were 2%. But again, think of that concept. Your pre-tax IRA is an adjustable rate or adjustable tax rate investment. Anyone's ever said that before. So if someone has and you've heard it, let me know. But I think I made that up. So if no one can say that it has been written or said, I'm going to copyright that tonight. Probably won't make me any money, but hey, I want to say I invented something. So there we go. Let's talk about control. It's my money. I want to choose how to spend it. No, you don't. At 72, you get told how much to spend. At 73, at 74, for the rest of your life, someone other than you gets to choose how much money you take out. Maybe you're okay with that, maybe you're not. You want more control, you got to have tax diversification. What is your retirement goal? Is your goal for retirement to minimize your taxes over your lifetime? Is it to leave behind a huge legacy? Is it somewhere in between? Is it to maximize the comfort that you have in retirement, the stability that you have? There's all these considerations that do go into planning. Should you Roth or should you not Roth? And all of these things kind of blend together to help you figure out the right path. I mentioned legacy goals already. There's a lot of good ways to give money. There's something called a QCD, a qualified charitable distribution. You can give to a public charity, take it from your traditional IRA. It doesn't count as part of your income and it satisfies your required distributions. By the way, if you have to take required distributions, you can convert those, pay the taxes from your bank account, and now you're just taking pre-tax money, making it Roth. You don't need it, and now you're going to be able to grow that tax-free for decades maybe and leave it tax-free for someone else. And who knows, you put a little Bitcoin in there and you can make them a trillionaire someday. So those were just some of the quick considerations. And again, the biggest thing I want you to think about is in life it's easy to defer. Oh, I'll pay my taxes later. Oh, I'll work out later. Oh, I'll clean the dishes later. But eventually later comes, and it's not fun. There's been plenty of nights at 1 a.m. when I've been delaying doing the dishes, and they're staring at me, and it's just like I swear that pile went from 3 dishes to a billion. Like I don't know. And unfortunately, again, the retirement tax time bomb is something that we see time in and time again for those who have been diligent savers and have built up sizable assets by the time they retire. A few questions, and then I'm going to get to the historical context and wrap up. Unfortunately, I don't have the time in front of me, so I'm going to just not talk too slow, or else I'll be here all night. It's going to be 10 o'clock at night Eastern, and everyone's going to look at me funny. Thanks, Zechariah. Appreciate it. Um, cool. So yeah. So let's think about, and you're just in time because I think this is your question. Could you please talk about after-tax contributions to a 401k, not Roth, and how to treat out-of-cycle withdrawals? So within a 401k, there's pre-tax, there's the Roth, and then there's this thing called after-tax. Simply put, after-tax is after-tax money that's been taxed already that you can now leave in your 401k. Some people will take that and roll it to a Roth IRA, and that's kind of a mega Roth. So you can put up to sometimes 30, 40,000 in there and roll it into a Roth IRA. Sometimes every month you can just roll it out whenever you want. If you don't choose to roll it into a Roth IRA, that tax, those after tax contributions you put in, at any point you can just take them back out and put it in your bank account and pay no taxes. Now, the growth on that after tax component is taxable and it should be rolled over into a traditional IRA. But simply put, with the after tax contributions, you either roll them into a Roth or you just take them out and spend them just like regular cash. Again, the contributions would be regular cash, the interest. You would most likely want to just roll that to a traditional IRA, continue to have that tax deferral, and then spend the money as needed. What tools can you use to pick stocks to grow your Roth? Option one, don't pick stocks. Pick a mutual fund, ETF, index fund, and let the market bear what it bears. Option two, there's a lot of ways to pick a stock. I love McDonald's. It's cheap. It always tastes relatively okay. Who knows how many chemicals are in it, but it works. And there's a McDonald's everywhere. McDonald's has turned out to be a pretty good stock. I've had an iPhone for 10 years. That turned out to be an okay stock. I use Google all the time. That's an okay stock. Tesla. Yeah, learned about that 10 years ago. Didn't put enough money in that. Would have made more. So there's a billion ways to pick good stocks. If you wanna really buy stocks, you have to find a company that you have conviction in, that you feel strongly that it's going to dominate at what they do, and that they're not going to have other competitors come in and take away their competitive advantage and lower their profits. You also want to understand, how do you analyze a company's cash flows? How do you look at their balance sheet? How do you understand their profitability, their expanding of users, the trajectory, the momentum? There's all these things that you want to have an understanding of, and it's hard. It's maybe even like going to the horse tracks and picking the right horse that's going to win the race. Not easy. I don't gamble like that, so I don't know. So unfortunately, there's no great answer. You can use tools like Seeking Alpha. You can look at fast graphs. You can go to the Motley Fool. But at the end of the day, the majority of stocks, even in the S&P 500, underperform the S&P 500. So if you want the super easy method, buy a growth ETF or index fund or mutual fund. You're going to get some pretty good returns doing just that. But if you do want to get a little saucy, absolutely, there are a lot of good things out there you can find to purchase. You just got to do some legwork, and unfortunately, there's no perfect answer. Last question: how to pay myself more to reduce tax burden? I'm not sure if I fully understand that question to give the right answer. To reduce tax burden, you either have to strategically plan the distributions you're taking from your investments. You have to do some work today to establish more money that's tax preferred in the future, be that conversions or doing after tax contributions or doing something else. You have to think about alternative income strategies such as a optional mortgage in retirement, also known as a reverse mortgage, or perhaps using a life insurance distribution plan where it's tax free in retirement. As far as paying yourself more, I don't know how you can pay yourself more unless you own a business. That could be one way you could do it. If you own a business, you could have a defined benefits program, do profit sharing, cross testing, and then you can give more money to yourself if you're older than your employees. So there's a lot of ways to take that. If there's something particular you want to learn more about, feel free to let us know offline and we can give you more. But hopefully the rapid fire of things that I just gave gives at least some type of clarity to something. All right, let's talk about historical significance. Uh, I looked on Google to see why history is important, and I was surprised by the elegance of the answer. I'll paraphrase. History shows us where we've been and can sometimes be a good indicator of where we're going or what's going to happen. As Grandma says, there's nothing new under the sun. She says that quite often, and she's right. So let's talk about historical things, and let's start with the true or false. True or false? We are currently living in a historically low tax rate environment. Spoiler alert, Kenna gave you the answer earlier. This is true. We are living in a historically low tax rate environment. If you don't believe me, take a look at the chart. You see that over time, taxes have gone up, they've gone down, but pretty much since 1964, they've gone down, 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 down. Now, if you want to see real numbers, following the Great Depression, Congress decided to increase the top marginal tax rate from 25% to 63%. I'm sure that helped people to become less depressed after the Great Depression. World War II, the top tax rate was 94% of taxable income. Wow. Enough said, right? The 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the highest tax rate never dipped below 70%. Holy moly, guacamole. 1980s, they did all this stuff. They lowered it to 50%. They eventually got it down to 28%. And Congress said, you know what? We will probably never have to raise taxes, but beyond 28% ever again. Well, that promise lasted 3 years. Taxes are higher than that now. So again, where are we? Historically, we're in a low tax rate environment. Why does that scare me? Well, because we are in a historically high national debt environment. Last time I checked, according to Google, Terry doesn't do the research, the United States had about $30 trillion in public debt. Trillion with a T. That's like 30 million times 1,000 times 1,000. So that's a trillion. That's a lot. So $30 trillion of debt. From 2000 to 2019, the national debt grew by 297%. 3x. That's a lot. 128% amount of debt to the GDP, gross domestic product in the United States. You're exactly right. So, how I would think about GDP, if your salary is $100,000 a year, that's like saying you have $128,000 in bad debt. Not your home, not your car, not your student loans. That's credit cards and personal loans. That's probably not a healthy financial situation for anybody. So again, our national debt as related to the gross domestic product that we produce annually, it's pretty significant. It's the largest it's ever been. Again, at $30 trillion, which if we were to take that same money, we could pay for every high school graduate in America to go to a 4-year degree school for 57 years straight and never miss a payment. So that's how big $30 trillion is. It's a lot, by the way. Social Security and Medicare. Those, I love Social Security and Medicare because of what they do for people. And they're complex programs. We're going to talk more about them. I don't have a problem with the programs per se, but the funding levels and the trajectories are not good. They're going to run out of money in the next 10 years or so. Now, to fix the problem isn't going to be that complex. They need to cut back benefits or they need to charge us more in taxes. Why am I worried about this? We need to pay more in taxes. There has to be more tax revenue to offset this deficit. So that's why we're getting the thumbs down here. Neither of them are on good standing in the next 10 years or so, or less, probably less. Something's going to give. Benefits are going down or taxes are going up, or we're going to have to wait until beyond 62 or 65 or 67 to claim Social Security. Medicare, I don't know. Maybe everyone will have Medicare before 65 or before they are chronically disabled. But again, these factors tied into our debt paints a bit of a grim picture. Again, also don't forget the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Remember, it lowered taxes for almost everybody. This doesn't last forever. In the next few years, things could spring back up. So someone who's currently in the 24% tax bracket, they could find themselves in the 33% marginal tax bracket, which is a 37% increase in their marginal tax rate. So again, there's this fallacy where people say, when I'm in retirement, I'll be in a lower tax bracket. You want to know who's in a lower tax bracket? People that don't have much money and they are not enjoying their retirement. If you want your retirement comfort to be what your comfort is now, you need the same amount of money. Unless you have tax-free money or tax-preferred money, you're gonna have the same tax bracket, same taxable rate. There's this fallacy that, oh, in retirement, my tax brackets will be nothing. Well, yeah, if you have no money, sorry, that's just what it is. So I would at least consider that your taxes may be the same as what they are now, if in fact your goal is to have the same level of living. If your standard of living is going to be much lower, then that's a different story. But most people I talk to, they want the same standard of living or more in retirement. So again, we've got to be realistic and we've got to be strategic as we think about how to win when it comes to retirement planning. So let's summarize. I picked a picture that was summary because this is the summary. Historically speaking, taxes are low. Historically speaking, the national debt is high. Expect tax hikes, benefit reductions. That's going to happen, probably. I'm not sure what other way that there is. There could be some other things that could be done to perhaps lower the national debt, but those are the easiest things that everybody's talking about. So that's the elephant in the room. So we're going to go ahead and conclude. Um, when it comes to retirement, we sometimes think of it as a destination. Look at this picture here. This person has climbed to the top of the mountain. They're looking down. I don't know about you, but when I go hiking, I'm really happy to be at the top. But then my next thought is, oh crap, I got to get back down. Hiking down the mountain is where most of the deaths occur. Decumulating your portfolio and making it last your lifetime is where most of the failures occur. So getting to retirement, yeah, that's good and all, but that's halfway home. Maybe. We still got to plan for 20, 30 years of ups and downs and rounds in order to get to our end state. So we've got to be really thoughtful about this. how do we successfully transition into and thrive during our retirement years? So there's a question. Is there a limit to the amount you can convert within a year? No, there's no limit. The limit is how much you're willing to pay in taxes. When you do conversions, you do want to think about your Medicare premium, Social Security taxability, any income-based programs you may be a part of, if you have the healthcare.gov programs or anything like that. But short answer, no, there's no limit on how much you can convert. It is completely up to you. Another concluding thought. I think we all have heard, don't put all your eggs in one basket. What I would submit to you is even if your eggs are in one basket, it's okay if your basket's sitting on a sturdy stool. But imagine if 95% of for this that one red leg. I don't know, that could be a wobbly table. You could have an omelet on the floor, and you don't want to put all your eggs in one omelet unless you're really hungry and you're gonna eat it off the floor. So here's what I'm saying. Having one strategy for retirement, maybe not the best strategy. Going in the gym and training one muscle, maybe not the best thing to do. I would suggest that it might make sense to have tax deferred, taxable, and tax free assets. That way, you now have investment arbitrage that you can strategically pick and choose what cards to play, when to play, so you can win the game or have a better opportunity to win the game. Another question, we can only do one conversion a year, right? Or is that just from a single traditional IRA? Uh, yeah, that's a good question. No, I believe you can do more than one conversion a year. There used to be recharacterizations that really a thing anymore. You can't do that after the fact like you used to. So honestly, I'm not 100% sure if that just pertains to one IRA or if it's aggregated across all of your IRAs. But generally, when the market goes down, good time to convert. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you can convert more than once. But I'm going to double check that because that's a good question. That's one of those things that we always look at, but I don't believe there's any rule that you can't convert more than once. I know I've converted at least once this year, and I may do it again. So that's a good question, Zachariah. So here are the topics we covered. Again, we talked about Roth account basics. We talked about practical application. We talked about the historical significance. And the goal was to tie all this together, the overarching theme. If we want to win the retirement game, we've got to be strategic. We've got to know what game we're playing. We got to know what outcome we're looking for. We've got to employ the right tactics. Let's not use a hammer for a job that could be better served with a screwdriver. And let's, think about what we want to get out of this thing called retirement and make sure we're walking down the path that's going to be the best for us. And to be the best for us, there's a lot of things we've got to consider. There's no one size fits all. Not everybody wears a size 10 shoe. So that's why they make so many different sizes. We want to get the right shoe for the right foot for the right activity. Again, swimming shoes versus hiking shoes versus beach shoes, probably different. As always, if you have further questions, comments, I'm going to stick around here for a little bit to answer any questions. But our website is back up and running. We fixed it. So you can go to innovativewealthbuilding.com. If your fingers don't want to type that much, you can go to teamiwb.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok someday. Terry doesn't know how to use it. Of course, our email is yourteam@teamiwb.com. Phone number is listed on the screen. And if you're in California, Maryland, in the 20619, you can stop by our office. Popcorn. It's near the movie theater on Three Notch Road. So, as always, we appreciate you tuning in and hopefully you took some things away from today. I will stand by and see if there's any further questions I can help with. But if not, again, thank you so much. We appreciate you tuning in and we hope to chat with you next time and look forward to the opportunity to help more. Have a great night and best wishes.